friends, it's Jasmine, and I hope that you all are doing well. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I am a witchy content creator here on YouTube. And if you are a returning subscriber, thank you so much for coming back. Today's video is going to be about my experience at the Indiana State Sanatorium. If you have not watched part 1, I suggest that you do so after watching this, or you can pause this video and go watch part 1 now. This is going to be part of a bigger video project series that will be in a playlist called the Indiana State Sanatorium. So feel free to check out part 1 or the live streams that we've done. You can watch my experience tape that I'm recording right now, as well as the experience tapes from several other people who were part of this project.
Hello, my name's Lorena. Some people call me Lori, some people call me Little Red, and some people call me Mama Rooster.
Hi, my name is Paige. I'm an English teacher by day.
Hi, I'm Kat, and I was part of the group that went to the Indiana State Sanatorium on June 1st.
Hi, I'm Matt. Today I'm going to talk about Indiana Sanatorium. I'd like to talk about my experiences that I had there and everything that kind of went on.
So without any further ado, let's get into my experience at the Indiana State Sanatorium. I was first introduced to the Indiana State Sanatorium by my friend Paige, who invited me along on this trip. And last summer, we went on a paranormal trip to the Whispers Estates, which I have also released a similar paranormal project over that experience. So if you're interested in kind of seeing our beginning, I suggest that you also check out the Whispers tapes as well. So I know that some of you may know me from here on YouTube or TikTok, or maybe even from the shop or classes that I've taught. But I also know too that there might be some of you watching this who maybe don't know me or who aren't familiar with the Indiana State Sanatorium. So I'll try to give you a brief introduction. I am a practicing witch of roughly about a decade, and I'm also the high priestess of the Solar Court Coven. I am very interested in all things occult, paranormal, supernatural. This is my second time trying to record and film this video. I tried filming some of it yesterday, and I was just having like some weird technological difficulties. So hopefully today I won't have any of those difficulties. The Indiana State Sanatorium, I believe, was founded in like the early 1900s, like 1908, 1906. And initially it was sort of a resource center and treatment facility for tuberculosis patients. And once they kind of found the cure to tuberculosis, it later became a senior living ward for like end of life care and hospice. And it also became a place for the mentally ill as well to receive treatment. Unsurprisingly, of course, there were a lot of patients who were severely neglected. I believe that, the death record at this place is in the several thousands, as well as like another roughly 1,000 people who just went missing. I don't know how you lose track of your patients. I really don't understand how that works without massive amounts of neglect. But when I was invited to go on this trip, I really didn't know a whole lot about the Indiana State Sanatorium. And at first, I kind of thought that maybe it would be beneficial for me to kind of go in cold. And what I mean by going in cold versus hot is if you go into a paranormal setting or some sort of investigation cold, that means that you really don't know much about the place. So you can have a little bit more of an unbiased perspective, because the power of suggestion is a very real thing. And if you go to a place and someone tells you what has commonly been experienced or what you might experience or what other people have experienced, sometimes your mind can manifest exactly those experiences. And it creates kind of this confirmation bias that I find to be really detrimental to the actual work at hand when it comes to sort of exploring and examining paranormal places. When Paige and I and some of our friends, we got together, we decided to pull some cards and kind of consult the tarot about who should be doing what and what exactly we should be doing. What should be our mission? what should be our mission for this place? I think that going into any paranormal setting, you should obviously be respectful, for one, you know, making sure that you're respecting the place and the spirits that are there. And also, in the case of the Indiana State Sanatorium, this place was shut down just in 2011. So it's a fairly recent kind of open spiritual wound at this place. It's not like it's been left abandoned for 50, 60, 80 years. You know, it only recently closed, meaning that the very real reality that some of my loved ones, your loved ones, or loved ones of our friends or our grandparents theoretically could have been in the era where they would have been neglected at this facility. So I wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page, that we're not going to go to the Indiana State Sanatorium with the idea that this is going to be a fun, spooky amusement sort of night, when this is truly a site of mourning and like a burial site and a death site. And I think that it should be treated with that level of respect. I think sometimes when ghost hunters, which I think that that particular verbology is a little bit problematic in the sense that, like, let's say my mother theoretically was neglected at the Indiana State Sanatorium and she happened to die there due to her neglect. And maybe some folklore and superstition surrounded her death and she kind of became a well-known spirit at the place. If people were going to the Indiana State Sanatorium with the intention of hunting my mother's spirit and antagonizing her or berating her, I would be very upset. And there are people who have relatives, who have known people who have been neglected at the sanatorium. So like I said, go in with respect. This is not just some fun amusement night for you and your friends to just fuck around and be disrespectful. People died here. Real people suffered here. I think that my perspective in this also as like a practicing witch is oftentimes going to be really different than your standard paranormal investigator, in the sense that I'm coming at this with more of an esoteric and magical sort of perspective and mindset. Not that I don't appreciate all the technology that we have. I think that that's great. That's just not super much like my area of expertise. And so when Paige and I and our friends, we got together, we had pulled cards, like I mentioned before, about, you know, what should be our mission here. I think when you're going into a place like this, it's important to have like a goal in mind. Like, what sort of experience are you looking to find? And I think usually the most appropriate thing is to go in with just open and receptive aura to just hear what the dead have to say. Because the dead do listen if you are willing to allow them to speak for themselves. And if you have ears that can hear them, they will speak with you. We decided to kind of go into this very similar to how we went in at Whispers. And if you're curious, there is a live video where you can go watch, where we were actually at the Apple, which is what we call the Applebee's. And we were drinking some perfect margaritas and having some appetizers while pulling cards. And I know to some people, they find this very amusing that we're like pulling tarot cards out at an Applebee's in public, talking about esoteric stuff, but that's just kind of how we roll, and that's our life. Through consulting the tarot, the cards suggested that I was to be the one to do Three Kings, which I won't lie, initially I was a little bit like shocked. I've already done Three Kings about 5 times now, and I did Three Kings most recently at the Whispers estate. So I was kind of thinking that maybe the cards were going to pick someone else to do Three Kings. However, that was not the case. The cards also suggested that Kat, once again, should be a middleman, which is the exact same way the cards fell when we had gone to Whispers, where I did Three Kings at Whispers and Kat was the middleman. And then we also pulled cards in regards to the seance and who should be leading the seance and what sort of the general goal of the seance should be. We consulted the cards prior to going also to kind of see, like, you know, what should we be looking out for? What are the dangers of us going? What are the benefits of us going? I think that any witch who's worth their salt should always practice some divination. In general, you should do divination before spell work, in my opinion. You should be doing divination before doing any sort of necromancy or spiritual work, like going to the Indiana State Sanatorium. It's in your best interest to consult your chosen divination system prior to, because there are going to be blind spots and there are going to be things that you might be able to foresee, so that way you can best prepare for it. So if you've watched part 1, you know that I met up with Paige and our friends at one of our favorite local restaurants downtown, and Paige had actually rented a car, and we left from downtown at the restaurant and we went west out to Rockville, Indiana, where the Indiana State Sanatorium actually is. And there we ended up meeting up with some of our friends and we started the tour. Now, I will say that going into the Indiana State Sanatorium, initially I had thought that I should go in completely cold, right? Like I had mentioned before. However, once I was chosen for Three Kings, I was pulling my own cards in regards to how should I best prepare for Three Kings? What should I do in regards to this Three Kings ritual? And my cards were very much suggesting, like, Jasmine, you're gonna be doing Three Kings, you should not be going into this cold. And for those of you who aren't familiar what the Three Kings ritual is, I will get into that and explain that further. But essentially you are conjuring and compelling malefic forces and entities during the ritual. And so you need to know the names of the entities that need to be invoked for this ritual to call them in and bring them in. So I did do a little bit of research. I talked to one of my friends and we watched some other investigations that people have done here on YouTube. And also I believe there was like a program on like Hulu or Netflix about the Indiana State Sanatorium that we watched as well. And that kind of helped prepare me, especially because when we were pulling cards at Applebee's, the cards were suggesting that I was to do Three Kings in what's called the tunnels, because at the Indiana State Sanatorium, there are about 4 main buildings and there's an underground tunnel system that connects all 4 buildings together. And the cards were kind of saying like, you should do Three Kings there because it's connected to all 4 buildings. And so if you are looking to draw and command and compel malefic entities, that would be the best place to do so, because if you're doing it in just one of the buildings, you're gonna be pulling from that building. But if you're doing it in the tunnels, then you're going to be pulling it from all 4 main buildings. Before the tour started, we did have to sign a waiver, which did not include anything about an NDA or filming or making content of any kind. What it did talk about was essentially just like common safety stuff of like, hey, if you fall and hurt yourself, you can't sue us. And also there was like a weird part in the waiver where it talked about not filming X-rated content, which kind of has me wondering if that's something that has happened at the Indiana State Sanatorium before. I don't know why someone would want to film X-rated content in an old tuberculosis ward, but
I don't know.
There's not anything in the waiver about filming in general though. And I thought it was really weird that our tour guide got really uncomfortable when I pulled out my video camera to start recording. Like he was like, "Are you filming?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "You can't record here, blah, blah, blah. You're not allowed to record here," which I was never told. There was no sign saying that you can't record. There was nothing in the waiver saying that I couldn't record. And I figured that most people who are going to a place like this probably do want to document their experience either through photos or through videos. That seems like a pretty common thing that people do. And I would also think that someone who is running a place such as this would want people to document their experiences. That way, information can be shared more easily about experiences that people are having there. However, that was not the case. I did end up getting permission to record, but overall the tour guide was just really, really sketchy and weird about me recording anything in terms of this, which kind of made me a little bit suspicious. I also thought too that the overall energy around the tour was not what I was expecting. I learned a lot about the tour guide's personal life, and there were some things that I feel like the tour guide didn't want to share with us because we were recording parts of the tour and they were like really weird about that. So I would say if you're looking to go to the Indiana State Sanatorium and if you plan on taking the offer up to have the tour, which is an option, I believe it's like $60 a person, and you essentially get the entire grounds from 5 p.m., that's when they do the tour, until 11 a.m. the next day. So it's a really cheap, sort of affordable experience if that's something that you're looking for. Rockville, Indiana is kind of out in the middle of nowhere. There's not a whole lot around there. So just bear in mind that if you do end up going on the tour, I think that, you know, they could probably have someone else running the tour with a little bit higher energy, and also someone who is, you know, more mindful of the fact that people really did live and were neglected and died here, and the place should be treated with more respect, in my opinion. I wasn't super impressed with the overall tour, and I really didn't learn anything from the tour that I couldn't have learned from a quick Google search myself. Of course, we were doing this in June, so in Indiana in June, it's extremely hot, it's extremely humid, and the tour lasted, I want to say, maybe about an hour and a half or so, and it was a walking tour. It was really cool to like see different parts of the grounds, like the infirmary and, you know, other places, but it was also very bizarre when we were being told that they have plans for these grounds to turn it into some sort of music hall and bed and breakfast, which just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And I thought it was really strange that you would want to take a place where, you know, thousands of people have died and turn it into some sort of strange musical entertainment venue. And also like vow renewals and doing weddings and having stuff like that there just seems really, really weird. I feel like if they're going to do anything of the sort like that, they should at least erect some sort of memorial monument for the people who suffered and who died there. Personally, I don't really foresee it working out very well as a wedding venue or a music sort of destination for camping and concerts. If they don't pay their respects to the dead, I think that the spirits will ensure that things go left if they are not properly accommodated. Our tour guide was also talking about how they're not really a big believer in the spiritual world or the paranormal, but they do sometimes have ghost hunters and paranormal experts who come out and help them with tours. And I was kind of just left overall feeling underwhelmed and disappointed by the tour. And I think having someone who is more knowledgeable and experienced with this sort of stuff would be more better equipped at giving a tour at the Indiana State Sanatorium. However, I still ended up having a great time at the Indiana State Sanatorium, so I don't want you to feel like I'm just like shitting on the tour guide, but yeah, kind of, I am. So after the tour, we ended up going back to kind of the home base, which I believe used to be like a children's ward or something, but it was the only place that had like running water and like working bathrooms and comfortable areas to actually sit, as well as air conditioning. And so we hung out there and waited for the rest of our group to get there, who weren't able to make it to the tour. And we also ended up pulling cards there as well. Me, Paige, and Hale were kind of pulling cards and assessing, okay, now that we've actually seen the grounds first person, do we want to add or subtract anything from our original plans? Because the cards at first were suggesting that we should do it down in the tunnels at the Indiana State Sanatorium. And then we were going to have a middleman on the first floor, and that was going to be Kat. But there's the main building that we were going to be doing this at, I think had 5 or 6 floors. And so should we have a middleman on every floor leading up to the seance? Sort of like how, you know, we kind of set it up in a similar fashion when we had gone to the Whispers Estates. Like I said, I have videos of that here on the channel, so if you'd like to check that out, feel free. You can just go onto my channel and look for the Whispers Estates experience footage and find it that way. When we were pulling cards, we were getting a ton of mixed messages at the children's ward. You know, we were asking, should we have someone else do middleman? Should I still do the 3 Kings? Should we still do it in the tunnels? Because during the tour, they did tell us about how in the senior living ward is where most people have felt the most extreme malevolence and have had malevolent and malefic sort of experiences. And I had kind of thought maybe I should do Three Kings there. And the cards were like, well, no, you shouldn't. And so we asked, should I still do Three Kings in the tunnels? And the cards were like, no, well, no, you shouldn't. And then we were like, should Kat still be the middleman? And the cards were like, well, no, they shouldn't. And then we were like, okay. And we were getting a ton of mixed messages. And so we ended up pulling some cards to see if we were kind of being messed with by some malefic entities or spirits. And the cards indicated that we were. And so that's when I decided that we should probably just stick to our original plan of me doing the Three Kings down in the tunnels, because that's what the cards originally suggested. And then have Kat be the middleman on the first floor. And then I had talked to Holly, who was another person who was in this experience with us, who was part of the project. And they decided to be the middleman on the next floor. And then we were going to have the seance on the floor above that. The floors that were above the seance were not very safe or secure, and we were warned about that. And so for the safety for our group, we decided just to stay off of those floors, considering there were massive chunks of the floor that were just missing. It's very dark. It would be very easy to fall through, quite literally, the floor onto the floor below you, or you could even fall through several floors. I mean, there was just chunks of flooring and wall just straight up missing. I mean, this place is in severe disrepair, and just walking around in general is a safety hazard. And so I understand that that's why they have you sign that waiver. And I would definitely suggest that if you were to go, you kind of prepare to be in this very abandoned, in disrepair sort of building. You know, there were spots where the floor was soft and it felt like if you were to jump the wrong way, you would quite literally fall through. There was also lots of wildlife that had kind of started reclaiming the building, be it by flora like plants and vines and even tree roots coming up through the building, as well as animals. Like at night, there were a ton of bats that had occupied the space, as I'm sure other animals probably too, just not ones that I saw. So my experience for this project, I think, is going to be a little bit different in the sense that I was the one doing Three Kings. So I do not have a first-hand account experience for the middleman, nor do I have a first-hand account experience for the seance. However, I have seen the tapes and listened to the audio and put together this project. So I do have like a general idea of kind of what went on, but I'm not really going to speak too much on the seance, nor am I really going to speak too much on the middleman experiences, because that was not my personal firsthand experience. So to start with first, I want to explain a little bit about what Three Kings is. This is something that I've definitely gotten a lot of questions about, and so I figured that would be the best place to start. So a Three Kings ritual is a ritual that is set up and designed to summon and conjure malefic energy and entities. And when we had gone to Applebee's with another friend, you know, we were asked, well, why would we want to do that? Why would you want to work with malefic energy? Why would you want to summon malefic energy? Da, 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 da. And I think that that's a reasonable question to ask. I mean, for me personally, in my practice, I work with all types of energy. So there are very much necessary times to wield more malefic energy. I think that for me as a witch, when it comes to the right-hand path or the left-hand path, I kind of feel a bit more ambidextrous, where I do what feels right and what is appropriate given the situation. So this particular ritual has recently gained a ton of popularity on sites that kind of explain and promote ritual games. So like Reddit or Creepypasta is where the Three Kings ritual has really gained a lot of notoriety, but allegedly it was also a Victorian parlor game as well. So it wasn't necessarily created on Creepypasta or Reddit. And I will also say that maybe not the name Three Kings, but this particular style of magic of controlling and commanding and compelling malefic energy is very Solomonic in nature. And what I mean by that is talking about Solomonic magic, which is a form of sihir or Arabian conjure, Middle Eastern magic. This is the same type of magic that is used in the Lesser and Greater Keys of Solomon. Solomon being this Abrahamic king who used the power and the authority of God to command and control demons, allegedly. That's how the story goes. And so this style of magic, of essentially enslaving spirits and controlling spirits to do your bidding, is not something that has been created in the past 10 years on apps and sites like Creepypasta and Reddit, but it's something much older. However, it being called Three Kings, and its popularity is more of a recent resurfacing. The whole point and goal of a Three Kings ritual is for the practitioner who's doing the ritual to essentially become a vessel for malefic energy to come in and possess. And then also you have these 3 mirrors, and those are also used as portals as well. So you're gonna set the ritual up essentially with, you're gonna need a chair, right? Kind of like the chair that I'm sitting in right now. And the practitioner would be bound and tied actually to the chair. Also going to need 3 large mirrors. Really good mirrors that work for this are like the big rectangular ones. I mean, you can get those pretty affordably for about $5 or so.
And you know, they say witches, we don't make a haunted house, we make a haunted home.
So you're gonna set 1 mirror up directly in front of you. So that way when you're looking at the mirror, you're able to see your own reflection directly in front of you. And then on both sides of you, like here and here, you should have 1 mirror and 1 mirror. This way you can see your reflection and your peripherals. And it should almost kind of create like what I call this medicine cabinet sort of effect, where these mirrors are all reflecting you and they're also kind of reflecting each other. So it sort of creates like this vortex. And mirrors are something that are oftentimes used within the craft in order to create portals and vortexes and to communicate with spirits and practice divination. So like I mentioned before, this is not necessarily a new thing. And the practitioner is going to also have their feet bound and tied up and placed within a vessel of water. Water is often thought to be a conduit for spirits and the dead, and so we're using this to kind of create a conduit for the spirits to come into the vessel of the practitioner. In order for this ritual to work properly, you will need to be completely in a dark space. So with as little natural light as possible. It's best to do this ritual at nighttime for that reason, but you also wanna, if there are windows that have, you know, street lights or light pollution or even the full moonlight coming in, you'll want to block that out with some sort of blanket. We were doing this in the tunnels, so we didn't really have to worry about that. However, going in, I did hear lots of talk about these giant cave crickets that were down in the tunnels. And while I wasn't entirely concerned about these malefic entities coming in and possessing me, because I've done this ritual several times already, I was a little bit worried about how my concentration would fare doing this ritual, because it does require a rather large amount of concentration if I had
Cave crickets crawling all over me. And
alhamdulillah, that was not the case, and I did not have cave crickets running all over me.
Thank the goddess.
You're also going to want to have a candle that is lit between you and the first mirror directly in front of you. The reason for this is because you do need the room to be illuminated somewhat, because part of the ritual involves mirror gazing. So you're going to be staring at your own reflection directly in front of you. And the light from the candle flame will also sort of create an effect to help with that divination. Now, this Three Kings ritual has scientific and psychological explanations as it does esoteric explanations. And so I'm going to talk about a little bit of both of those. First, on a psychological and scientific aspect of how this ritual actually works, because I think that, to me, magic and science can kind of go hand in hand. I don't think that they're enemies. I think that they just explain different aspects of our natural and material world. And so when you are doing this ritual, it does also require the practitioner to be able to be quite proficient at what's called disassociation, where you kind of disassociate from reality. If you are someone who struggles with disassociating, I don't think it will be very easy for you as a practitioner to really do any kind of trance work. Now, that doesn't mean that a witch who is able to do that is better or stronger than a witch who can't really disassociate very well or who can't untether their spirit very well. because I believe that we all have different strengths and weaknesses. This is not a ritual that is going to be easy for every single witch to do. This is something that definitely requires a particular skill set. Now, take all the magic and esoteric aspects aside. Take the paranormal place aside. If you were to go into your own bathroom and turn off the light and light a candle and stare at your own reflection for a solid 2 minutes, which doesn't sound like a lot of time, but in the moment of complete silence in the dark with only a candle lit, if you stare at your own reflection in the mirror, there will be a psychological effect to where your brain kind of almost creates like this mirage sort of effect where what you are looking at starts to change and shift. And logically, theoretically, right, you know that that's just your own reflection. And scientifically and psychologically, we would say, oh, like your subconscious mind is filtering things out. And so what you are seeing is projections from your own subconscious. And I think that that is completely fair and valid. And I'm not here to say that that's not really what's happening. But from an esoteric aspect, I'm saying, where are these things coming from? And if they are really just simply projections in our subconscious, it's interesting how they often line up with real things that have gone on there. The actual footage from the Three Kings ritual is quite graphic. When we were setting everything up, let me rewind. We only had about 45 minutes to do this. And the reason for that is because it can be quite damaging psychologically and also physically unsafe for someone to be in this sort of ritual for longer than an hour, which I definitely, at first, if you go back and watch the video content, at first, I definitely thought if you go back and watch the video content that maybe we would be able to do this for longer than 45 minutes, right? Because we've done this before. And so maybe each time we can get a little bit better and a little bit stronger together as a group. However, our cards definitely suggested, no, don't do that. Stick to the 45-minute rule. And so from the start of Three Kings to the end of the seance in Three Kings, we have 45 minutes total. And so the Three Kings ritual would start off where the group gets together and we say some powerful invocations of protection. We personally do cast a circle as well. It's not so much a circle of like keeping things out, but it's more so a circle of like raising power and energy around the practitioner who is doing Three Kings, which in this case, it was me. And then also that practitioner gets, you know, tied up and their feet placed in water and the candle lit and the mirror situated and all of that. And then one more thing that is a pretty strong suggestion. I don't know if I would go so far as to say that it's an absolute requirement, but this ritual does involve also inebriation, which you can do through your own chosen method. I mean, the most popular methods of that would definitely be alcohol. I mean, there's a reason why we call alcohol spirits, if you think about it, like imbibing in spirits. So this doesn't mean that the person doing Three Kings needs to be absolutely shit-faced out of their mind. That's not going to be helpful to the ritual, but they do need to not be completely sober, and this will help aid in spiritually untethering themselves. So when I had talked about before, like disassociation, right? That being a very powerful tool in a witch's arsenal. From an esoteric perspective, this is kind of about like untethering your spirit to allow other spirits entry, or you could do this to allow your spirit to travel, whether that be called witch's flight or, you know, whatever. Witches call it different things. In this ritual though, you're untethering yourself and taking a internal step back to allow something quite literally into you to possess you, to take a step forward. And you will physically see manifestations while you are doing this ritual in the mirrors. But another caveat to this ritual is that you have to stay completely focused on the mirror directly in front of you. So at no time should you be looking at the mirror to your left or right, as that can completely distort and mess up the ritual and also potentially put the practitioner in harm's way by doing so. From a witch's perspective, you are going to be down there with malefic energy. You are there with lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, these are not things that are excited to see you, nor do they want to help you. Their whole purpose is to hurt you and to hurt your group, to harm you, to trick you, and to beguile you. That's their intention. And that's the intention of the three kings, is to conjure these malefic energies and forces. And you will have malefic energy that speaks truth, and you will have malefic energy that speaks nothing but lies. And oftentimes it is the practitioner's role to kind of decipher what they are hearing audibly, as well as what they are seeing visually. And that's not something that's super easy to do while you are in a trance-like state of trying to remember and keep track of the experience that you are having while you are having it. It's very difficult. And then another aspect to this ritual is essentially, you've heard of automatic writing, right? So this ritual also involves like sacred babbling, it's been called. So the same concept as automatic writing, but it's automatic talking. So the whole time during the ritual, the practitioner is channeling the energy that's possessing them and allowing the spirits to speak through them. Now, once again, on a psychological or scientific level, we would look at this and say, okay, so whatever is coming out of this person's mouth during this ritual is coming from their subconscious mind. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but from the esoteric or witchy perspective, these are the words and voices of real entities or malefic spirits that are possessing the practitioner of this ritual. The actual Three Kings tapes, like I mentioned earlier, is going to stay on Patreon. It is extremely graphic, and it's something that I myself, even being the one to do the ritual, have a hard time watching. This particular Three Kings was significantly more draining and difficult for me than the Whispers Estates one was. If you are interested in seeing the seance footage from the actual seance that Paige and Hale were kind of co-leading, and Jordan was doing the Estes method, working with the spirit box, that's gonna be on Patreon. That's an exclusive item there. If you are interested in seeing the Three Kings ritual, that's on Patreon. And then I also have taken the audio from Three Kings and I've layered it over the audio and video from the seance, because that is where we get the most interesting research, because we're in completely different places in this building. And it's interesting to see what matches and layers up during both of those rituals. So that tape is also on Patreon. If you would like to view and access there, you can. There will be clips of all three of those videos during this project, but if you want to view them in entirety, they are not going to be released here on YouTube. So because of the nature of this ritual, I really can't speak a whole lot on what exactly happened. I was in a heavy trance-like state during this ritual. I, of course, was inebriated, and it was extremely draining. And when I was looking at the layered footage, it was really interesting because Jordan, who was on the spirit box, was saying how there's 41 inside of her. And I took that to kind of mean later, when I was reviewing all of the tapes and footage, that I had 41 malefic entities inside of me.
Talk about a hell of a Tuesday night, right?
No, but in all seriousness, I believe that. I can recall about 4 entities that I can remember seeing in the mirrors. I can remember seeing my own face sort of distort into their faces. I also find it interesting that when we were reviewing the tapes as a group afterwards, there are several different languages, and languages that I don't even speak, like Russian, for example, that are in the Three Kings video. Also, this place, the hospital and the admin portion, and especially the senior living home, had a ton of like Bibles, and also Bible scripture verses that aren't even necessarily biblical, that I think might have been manufactured. And so in the Three Kings video, there's also a lot of like speaking in tongues, which is not even something I've ever really done before, nor is it anything that's a part of my practice. But as a witch, it really wouldn't surprise me if that sort of practice was something that was done in this setting, and that if some of the entities are mirroring that, There's also some Arabic mixed in there as well, which I feel like might have been an ancestor of mine that was kind of like coming through as a way to like try to protect me. Keep in mind, this is also like a commanding and compelling ritual. So there's lots of very strong language that's used, lots of yelling. Kat, who was doing the middleman experience, which the whole purpose of the middleman is to essentially kind of be an extra barrier between the seance. And Kat, who was doing the middleman, and I believe Holly, and also the seance people, aside from Jordan, because he was doing the Estes method, so he had headphones on, they could hear my voice carrying throughout this entire space. I mean, it was echoing throughout the tunnels. It was resonating throughout the building. And we told everyone, we had kind of briefed up as a group before we started the ritual, and we were like, look, if you are not down to do this, that is okay, but please stay out of the building and please stay out of the tunnels, because that could really interfere. And we did have some people from the group who were not comfortable or who did not want to participate, and they hung out outside in their cars, which was totally fine. There is one particular spirit / entity that was extremely malevolent that did also kind of get out from the Three Kings ritual, and I believe did maybe interfere somewhat with our middlemen. This experience was really hard and heavy for Kat. I think that if you watch Kat's middleman tape, which is where they're recording their experience of doing the middleman, which that'll also be on Patreon. If you watch that, it starts off with them almost kind of like self-soothing themselves, and then it gradually turns into a really deep sadness. And even after everything was said and done, like in their own experience tape, you'll see them talk about it. They went home and cried. And even us filming Kat's experience footage, I could tell as the producer was not easy for Kat to do and to talk about, because some of this does hit so close to home for Kat. And I also believe Kat to be like an extremely sort of energy receptive person. And so I can only imagine how difficult it was for them emotionally. Holly, who was one of our other middlemen, essentially left like right after the whole thing was said and done. They really didn't stick around, nor did their partner, or I believe their dad. They all kind of just like packed up and left. Allegedly, Holly was being like attacked by bats while they were doing their middleman experience. So I feel like that could have also been this entity. Prior to this trip, as which I decided to take a clairvoyant spiritual protection sort of bath, where I was specifically looking to trigger a oracle vision, and spiritual baths are something that is very much a part of my practice, and doing psychic baths is something that I would totally be willing to talk about here on the channel and share with you all if you guys are interested in that. But during my psychic vision bath, what I was seeing was like this big staircase, which ended up being the staircase in the main building that we were at, coincidentally. And it was like all in black and white, and I was like walking up in first person up the stairs, but I was hearing something walk up the stairs, but not on the actual stairs themselves, but instead up the walls. But I wasn't seeing what was walking up the walls. And then I heard like almost like radio static, kind of almost like Jordan's Estes method with the radio frequencies. And I was hearing walls, WALLS, space, crawl, CRAWL, walls crawl, walls crawl, walls crawl, over and over and over and over again. And it actually turns out that the entity, the spirit, did also show up in the seance. And so that means that I wouldn't say that the Three Kings ritual was like a failure, because I do think that it can help prevent malefic energy from interfering with the seance. I don't think that any one witch is going to be able to hold in a whole bunch of malefic energy for an extended period of time. And I think that if any witch is pretending or acting like they're this big Billy badass who can just hold all of this in forever, is on one hand, they're lying, quite frankly, to you. And also too, that really shows a level of, I feel like, ego and narcissism, that they think that they could really do that. Even King Solomon this Abrahamic king was not in the long run able to do this long term. And I think that's why the ritual is supposed to only last about 45 minutes total, which meant the moment they left me down there in the tunnels, they only had 45 minutes to get all the way upstairs, do the seance, do what they need to do, get the information that they are able to get, and then come all the way down to the middleman Cat for Cat to come down to the tunnels to come get me. So we're on limited time here. I do think that without doing Three Kings, there would have been a lot more malefic disruptions in the seance. Oftentimes in my experience, when you're doing a seance in a place like this, you're going to also get entities that feed off of people's fear and that also try to antagonize the living as well as the dead. And so I do think that the Three Kings was successful in the sense that no one was physically injured, no crazy wild shit happened really during the seance as far as like physical manifestations. No one was like possessed or any like crazy thing happened like that. And overall, it was an extremely beneficial seance. And from what I understand from watching the footage and the tapes and reviewing it with the team is that we actually got a lot more workable information out of this seance than the last seance. So I would say that this Three Kings ritual in a way was even more successful than our last Three Kings ritual. There was a man named Wallace Crawl who was featured in the seance and also like in actual records. So you can explore that yourself. I'm not going to go into that a whole lot in this tape. Going back to this Three Kings ritual, like I said, is very jarring for me personally. And I remember after this ritual, I felt so sick and so feverish, which hadn't really happened to me the previous times I had done Three Kings. If you watch the Whispers tapes, the last time I did Three Kings, like I left that ritual laughing and mostly being kind of with it. I just had to ground myself and eat a little bit. And this ritual, it's wild because there are just huge chunks of time that I just straight up cannot even remember. Almost like I was quite literally put under anesthesia. And then also like after, it took probably about 30 or 40 minutes of me chugging water and eating for me to start to kind of feel like myself. I really don't remember Kat walking me out of the tunnels. I do remember being outside and having to lean up against someone's car because I felt like I was gonna pass out. And also it's June, it was super hot and humid, but I remember being absolutely freezing after that ritual and Kat giving me her hoodie to try to like warm me up. And I was shaking, I was so cold. We had gone back to the children's ward where we kind of set up our home base and we re-listened to everything. And I think that everyone was quite shocked to what we actually got from the seance in Three Kings. And now that we have a footage tape with the layeredness, I think it's even more shocking as to what actually came out of the whole experience. It did take me about 3 days to actually kind of start to feel like myself again. This ritual took a lot out of me. And so that's why I feel like when Jordan was saying how like there's 41 inside of her, that checks out for me because it really did feel like that. And like I said, I wasn't really myself for several days. I was extremely fatigued and tired, and it felt worse than even just like a hangover, which I was inebriated, but the point isn't to be drunk. I wasn't drunk at any time during this evening. And trust me, I've definitely drank too much before. I've definitely had hangovers before. And this did not feel like that. This felt like being spiritually depleted for several days. And, you know, of course, when I came home, I took a cleansing bath and cleansed myself and my energy and, you know, did all the stuff that I normally do. But this type of work takes a lot out of you. And so if you're going to be doing something like this, you just need to know that, like, this is what it is. And this is not easy work to do. It's very draining. There was also like so much spitting, and I'm not really sure why there was so much spit, but I think that led to me being more dehydrated because during the footage and the tapes, I'm just like almost like spitting up almost like the entire time. And I think that led to me feeling more dehydrated as well. And I'm not sure if that was, you know, my trance self trying to command and compel the spirits, because we didn't have nearly as much spit during the Three Kings ritual at the Whispers Estates. So all in all, I think it was an extremely successful trip. I would say if you're going to go to something like this, I would go with respect. and I would go well prepared, bring water, bring snacks, bring some stuff to ground yourself, wear some good shoes, go with people who you trust. And that's kind of my experience from the Indiana State Sanatorium. I will be releasing another experience tape like this one every week, starting in August. So stick around and check out what some of the other team members have to say about this experience. And if you do end up watching the Three Kings video or the seance video or the layered footage, let me know what you think of it. And, you know, if there's anything that sticks out to you that's peculiar in that footage tapes, because I think that having multiple sets of eyes to review this material is helpful, because I've had people who weren't even physically on the team with us during this who have reviewed the footage with me and who have pointed things out that I didn't even notice. Like part of the Three Kings ritual where it's like I'm speaking Russian or speaking in tongues, or pointing out the fact that, yeah, no, this place had a bunch of weird scripture verses. And so the speaking in tongues thing could almost be like picking up on an imprint from an entity of when maybe people were speaking in tongues. I don't want this video to be too long, so I am going to end it here. Let me know what you guys think of this project thus far. I hope that you all are well. And when I'm filming this, it's summer solstice, so I hope that you've all have had a good solstice, and by the time I'll be releasing this, it'll probably be around Lammas, Lunaset, or the first harvest. So if you celebrate that, I hope that it's an abundant first harvest for you. I love you all, and many blessings.